a national network for talented tech pros and fast-growing companies. It's been busy collecting data from emerging tech hubs around the country. Powdercake founder Matt Hunkler is here to share new insights into recruiting and retaining tech talent in Indiana and across the heartland. Plus, a Hoosier tech company mastering Python coding, marking 20 years in business. The co-founder of 6 Feet Up is here to talk about working with big universities like Notre Dame and UCLA and government organizations like NASA. And lawmakers have convened for the 2019 Indiana General Assembly to draft a 2-year state budget and sift through some contentious issues. Indiana Chamber President Kevin Brinegar is here to preview some hot-button topics. Details on those stories and much more ahead on this edition of Inside Indiana Business.
Top a show with music full. Stand by D1 Sound, sponsored open with music. Stand by camera 3 with Gary. We're out in 5, 4, 3, 2, dissolve, cue Gary.
Hello and welcome to Inside Indiana Business. I'm Gary Dick. Indianapolis-based web-based connections engine for tech entrepreneurs, investors, and professionals. Powderkeg has completed a survey of 8 emerging tech hubs, including Indianapolis, Denver, and Nashville, among others, in 2018. Not surprisingly, recruiting tech talent said to be the largest and most costly hurdle for scaling tech companies. Also, company culture ranks as the most important factor in tech professionals taking a new job. And for more on the census reports and what's planned for the year ahead, pleased to welcome back to the show Powderkeg founder and CEO Matt Hunkler. And Matt, as always, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Gary.
And congratulations. Powderkeg in just over a year really has a lot going on. Give us the thumbnail business model of Powderkeg.
Sure. So Powderkeg, which started right here in Indianapolis, is now a national network for the fastest growing tech companies, particularly in the heartland. And it's not just the tech companies, it's the entire ecosystem that helps grow this tech community that's now more and more becoming this national tech community. So it's the professionals, it's the educators, it's the employers, of course, and the investors who are helping fuel the growth of these tech companies. We're really focused on building technology behind the platform. So this platform that we've grown now to over 10,000 members has a connections engine behind it, helping connect those members to the resources they need to grow and scale.
You talk about growing in scale. A number of communities around the country are growing their tech ecosystem. You surveyed in 2018 8 emerging tech hubs, Indianapolis among them. I think that may have been the first one.
Yes.
Right. But you were in Denver and a number of cities around the country. Oh, Cincinnati, Denver, Boulder, Chattanooga, Nashville, Memphis, and Knoxville. Your big takeaway from all the data
oh
that
my
you
gosh.
uncovered?
The one big takeaway, it's hard to pick just one, and of course all that information is freely available to download if you want to go deeper in any of those markets. But the thing that's really interesting to see is that the middle of the country is really rising. These companies are scaling fast. And when you benchmark the fastest growing tech companies in the heartland against the fastest growing tech companies in the valley, they are really actually scaling much faster. Now, that's great, but there's also a challenge there because you have to meet the talent demands as these companies grow and scale. And of course, we have great universities here in Indiana and across the heartland, but a lot of those universities are actually exporting their talent to the coasts. So we're very focused on helping that talent, not just from the universities, but even outside of tech or in other tech companies as they get acquired or as they grow and scale, looking for that next step in their career. We want to help create those and facilitate those connections.
So obviously tech talent, a big issue for scaling tech companies. Also culture,
yes.
Very important. And you found in these surveys that culture is really a determining factor for tech professionals taking a job or maybe leaving a job, right?
That was actually the #1 reason people decided to join a tech company or leave a tech company in every one of our markets. I think one market it was #2, but it was a very close #2. And And it really was very much focused on three things. It's the leadership style of these companies. It's the innovation style. So like what kind of innovation, what kind of tools are you using, what industries? And then of course, it's the values of those companies. So we're really focused on this next version of the tech census, going deeper on the culture. Because these tech companies are amazing and doing amazing things, but they don't always get the spotlight. Unfortunately, there's not an Inside Indiana business going daily to cover all of the companies in not just Indiana, but across the heartland.
Yeah.
And so that's really what this next version of the tech census is going to focus on, shining a light on these companies so that they're not getting that same turnover and they're not struggling to fill these roles.
What's your assessment now? You get around the country and you go in depth in these markets. As you look at Indianapolis and the growth of the tech community, the tech ecosystem in Indy, but also around the state, talk about that as it compares to some of these other emerging tech markets.
Sure, so I think it's great to recognize the strengths of Indiana, but it's also great to recognize where there's opportunity for us to grow. For instance, in Cincinnati, which is just less than 2 hours away if you're driving down the highway, they do a phenomenal job connecting their high-growth tech companies with the big cos, as they call them. So the Procter & Gamble's, the Kroger's of the world, and Centrifuge is a very big part of that, and they were our partner in Cincinnati. In fact, the Ohio governor was tweeting and sharing about it after the tech census went live. Colorado does a phenomenal job of sort of living out their give first mentality in their culture across Colorado, whether that's Denver or Boulder, the entire Front Range. So it's fun to kind of take some of those things and try to bring them back here to Indiana so that our tech community can keep growing.
And the info available at Powder Keg, the website,
powderkeg.com. And actually, we're inviting right now companies to get featured at powderkeg.com/feature to get a free feature on their tech company.
All right. Matt Hunkler from Powder Keg, thanks for the information. We'll look forward to following your story in the year ahead as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Gary.
Well, still ahead, the 2019 Indiana General Assembly now in session. Indiana Chamber President Kevin Brininger is here to talk about high priority issues. But first, Fisher's based 6 Feet Up celebrating its 20th anniversary. The company's co-founder and chief technology officer here to talk about the milestone and a lot more. It's time now to go inside innovation, brought to you by DMI, mobilizing enterprises for the connected world. Well, a lot has changed for Python software and cloud consulting company 6 Feet Up as it marks its 20th anniversary this year. The company has opened a new office in the Fishers Technology Park. It's also running the largest tech meetup in the state called Indy Pi, and completed projects for NASA's new Horizon probe to Pluto. For more on 6 Feet Up's 2 decades of growth and what's next, let's turn now to co-founder and chief technology officer Calvin Hendricks Parker. And Calvin, as always, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Congratulations on 20 years, too. That is a big accomplishment. Go back 20 years. You and your wife, Gabrielle, founded the company in San Francisco, right? Talk about that.
Yeah, we literally founded it in our living room in South of Market area, San Francisco. We had a server that doubled as a coffee table at the time, and then eventually started billing those customers and turned it into a real bona fide business.
What was key to really that? Did the light switch go off? Was it the connection to Python? What was it that really sparked the company and get you on that growth path?
I think it was actually the excitement of the .com boom. I mean, we were there in 2000 timeframe. There was a lot going on, and it was a lot happening around application development and web. And so we actually got the opportunity to build a couple sites really quickly for a couple customers, and that was what kind of spawned 6 Feet Up itself.
The move back to Indiana, you have Indiana connections, of course, but moving here in I think 2003, why do that? Why move to Indiana?
Well, the cost of living in the Bay Area is horrific. It still is. And I think one of the best opportunities we saw coming back here was able to grow our business in a nice, organic, controlled way, and the ability to have that quality of life at the same time.
Hear about Python, the coding platform Python. Talk about that technology, how it's enabled you to grow, but also your mix of customers, big universities, Notre Dame, UCLA, big companies, Capital One, I think is a big customer of yours, and NASA. So you got some pretty impressive customers.
I mean, the Python programming language is so easy for people to get started with, that people who are scientists can pick it up and quickly be productive. And that's aided us along the way, is that people who've picked it up internally and maybe gotten in a little over their head, so they actually call on a company like 6 Feet Up to come in and take care of those some more sophisticated requirements, or they've got a larger backlog than they could normally take care of. So having that Python chops in-house has actually helped us grow our company because we can help others.
Yeah, and you see real room for growth opportunities.
Oh, I do. I mean, since, like you said, we were running the largest single tech meetup here in town, IndiePie. The real growth's happened in the last 2 or 3 years, and all of that growth has been in data science, machine learning, analytics, artificial intelligence, and I think that's where I see us growing as well.
So in those areas, and you're seeing you've got about 16 employees now, you're seeing the opportunity to hire more as part of that, right?
Right. I mean, look, over the next 2 years, we'd love to be able to double our existing staff. We already have a lot of demand for the type of services we're doing around cloud transformational services, Python enhancements to existing applications, or helping to build machine learning and artificial intelligence apps.
Exciting things happening at 6 Feet Up, a Fishers-based company here in Indiana. Calvin Hendricks Parker, thanks very much. Congratulations, and please pass along congrats to your wife, Gabrielle, too.
I will.
It's a great company.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, here's what's on tap now in tech news, served up by Sun King. 1150 Academy President John Qualls is on the move. He's been leading the Fishers-based coding school for the past 4 years, but is now turning his full attention to a new startup he co-founded, Purposely. The goal is to help individuals find their passion and their purpose. Several programs and initiatives across the state will benefit from a donation made by the Indy Women in Tech Championship to the Indy Women in Tech Foundation. The $180,000 will foster women in tech initiatives, STEM days, and career transitioning. And for Tech News 24/7, be sure to check out InsideIndianaBusiness.com. Still ahead, Carmel-based nonprofit Invest Ed has released a new survey that highlights how Indiana-based employers can grow talent by helping employees tackle their student loan debt. But next, what will be the hot button issues at the 2019 session of the Indiana General Assembly? Hate crime legislation, workforce, sports gambling. We'll look at some of the key issues that lawmakers will tackle in the session. Here's what's making news now around Indiana, brought to you by your Indiana Pacers. Well, Bloomington-based Cook Medical has finalized an agreement to purchase a former North Carolina cigarette factory. The medical device manufacturer completed an agreement to buy the facility in Winston-Salem and plans to convert a section of the long-standing R.J. Reynolds facility into a manufacturing plant this year. Michigan-based Spartan Nash has completed its acquisition of South Bend-based Martin's Supermarkets. The purchase was closed December 31, but terms not disclosed. At Purdue University, state and community leaders are remembering Tyler Trent, the Purdue superfan who passed away this week after a battle with bone cancer. In a statement, Governor Eric Holcomb called Trent among the biggest, strongest, and wisest people you could ever meet. Well, members of the Indiana General Assembly have convened for the 2019 legislative session. This budget year could potentially be sidetracked by heated debate over hate crime legislation. Indiana Chamber of Commerce President Kevin Brinegar is here now with a look at some of the key policy discussions to watch for. And as always, Kevin, welcome to the program.
Gary, good to see you. Happy New Year.
All right. Happy New Year to you. As you look at this session, I know the Chamber is really focused on the business agenda, but that deals with health and making Indiana a healthier place.
Yes, because our unhealthiness is very costly to employers. We'll focus particularly on smoking. Our smoking rate in Indiana is 50% higher than the national average and cost businesses in Indiana an estimated $6.2 billion a year in higher healthcare costs, lost time, absenteeism, and lost productivity. And we are part of the Alliance for a Healthier Indiana that wants to address that through raising the cigarette tax because smokers are price sensitive, and that would create a higher barrier of entry for young people to start, and raising the legal smoking age in Indiana, as 6 or 8 states now have done, to age 21. And we need to, in conjunction with that, address the vaping crisis that is starting to happen in our schools. And get that out by raising the age.
Do you think legislators have an appetite for that $2 a pack tax increase? It's a big number, do you think?
I think that remains to be seen. We've surveyed legislators this summer, and we got about a third of them to respond, and it was a strong, I think, 60–70% response. It's supported by the general public by over 70% of Hoosier support raising the cigarette tax, particularly if the money is used for health-related programs like DCS, HIP 2.0, et cetera. But it may require a financial need for revenue to get them to take the plunge or take the bite off a cigarette tax, because there's obviously a no tax sentiment that is always pervasive.
I mentioned in the introduction there potential hate crime legislation will likely get a lot of attention. The chamber is on record as supporting the legislation. There's some who are opposed to it, depending on the language, those types of things. As you like bias crimes law, what do you see as the debate? Where do you see it going in this session ahead? Well, I think the most important thing is to pass bias crime legislation that Indiana does not currently have, that would get us off of the list. Well, there are several, but the one in particular is developed by the National NAACP of states that do not have a bias crime statute, and onto the list of those that do. The particulars, the specifics are important as well, and our policy position calls for a broad inclusion, including sexual preference and gender identity. But getting off the bad list and onto the good list is most important. But the details are going to be hotly debated and contested for sure. Only have 30 seconds, Kevin, but big leadership changes at the State House, right? Yeah, new President Pro Tem Rod Bray, new Majority Leader. You've got a new Appropriations Chair doing his first budget for the first time, Ryan Mishler, and a relatively new Tax and Fiscal Policy Chair on the Senate side. You've got, with the tragic accident of Dr. Tim Brown, and he's still recovering, a new person that's mostly, it looks like, going to be calling the shots, or at least co-leader in the Ways and Means Committee. So there's a lot for those of us out in the hallway to get accustomed to and see how they're going to run and manage things. All right, will be a busy session, no doubt, and I'm sure we'll have you back a number of times. Kevin Brinegar from the Indiana Chamber of Commerce, thanks as always. Gary, thank you for the opportunity. All right. Coming up next, some education leaders say to develop a 21st century skilled workforce, Hoosiers need the tools to know how to pay for training and education beyond high school. InvestEd Marketing VP Bill Wozniak will break down the results of a new survey. There he is in the Inside Indiana Business Social Media Lounge, presented by the seasoned commercial bankers at Star Bank, getting to know you and your business. Well, as the war for talent looms, a new report out shows Indiana employers who provide student loan assistance have somewhat of a competitive advantage. A study from Carmel-based nonprofit InvestEd shows some 86% of respondents say employers that offer student loan repayment programs are better positioned to attract top talent. For more now on how student loan debt could impact recruitment, retention, and overall employee productivity, let's talk now with InvestEd Vice President of Marketing, Bill Wozniak. And Bill, welcome to the program as always.
Thank you so much.
First of all, InvestEd, this is an organization founded by, created by the Indiana General Assembly back in the early 80s. Give us the thumbnail model.
Absolutely. We help any Hoosier family with anything related to paying for college, with a focus on getting through college, getting the degree with the least amount of debt possible.
So there's a lot of financial literacy and those types of things involved there. This study that you undertook late in the year last year, I think is interesting because it focuses on how Hoosiers feel about, are impacted by student debt, right?
Absolutely. Students that then become workers get into the workforce. They have the education that they need. They get out there. They're ready to get going. And now, even though they might be making a very good salary, or at least a fair salary, they're really burdened by some of the student debt, and they don't often know where to go and how to fix it.
And it really is. I know that a lot of numbers are out there, but the numbers are staggering, right? When you look at the average debt that they're facing, especially young graduates.
Absolutely. This is a nationwide problem where the students have this debt, and they get through. They've been so focused on getting the degree, getting the education, getting the job, when all of a sudden the first payment becomes due or the second payment becomes due, they realize, wait a minute, I might not have budgeted for this completely.
Now, you do a lot of work with individuals and families and schools around the state, but this really touches on companies, right? And the impact that companies are facing with employees who have the burden of that student debt?
Yes, it comes from two directions, we believe. The employer wants a student, a worker that's going to stick around for a while. Let's have some retention. And they want their employees to be happy. If the employee is taking on a part-time job, their focus sort of wavers, they're starting to get stretched because they're just trying to make their student loan payments, the employer wants a better, more focused worker, and the employee has said resoundingly they want help with this student loan situation, so both sides can benefit.
So there's a real feeling that with addressing the student debt issue can have a real impact on retention, attraction and retention of talent.
Absolutely. It's a win-win where the employer now gets a more focused worker. One of the national studies showed that almost 90% of employees said they would stay at an employer 5 years with some help on the student loan side. And that help can be many different varieties. But now the employer gets that retention, the worker's happier and more productive.
Well, you talk about some of the options that employers might have. There could be a financial piece there, but even without writing a check, there are some options too.
Absolutely. It can be the check writing, but it doesn't have to be. Many times, in fact, the majority of times when we help a particular employer and employees, they just didn't know how to get things organized, how to get it lined up, what resources were available, and then to get it done that way, and they can both benefit greatly from that.
All right, interesting study on talent, student debt. Bill Wozniak from InvestEd. Thanks very much for being here. We'll be following the story in the months ahead too.
Thank you.
Well, coming up, the new OrthoND Foundation YMCA has been in the works for years now. It's officially open now. We'll take you inside the first facility of its kind in the nation to offer specialized medical services for veterans. Stay with us.
Stand by D1 Sound, sponsored open with music. Stand by camera 3 with Gary. We're out in 5, 4,
3 seconds.
2, dissolve, cue Gary.
It's time now for the Business of Health, brought to you by Hendricks Regional Health. Well, the new YMCA in Indianapolis is the first in the country to have a special focus on veterans. The Pike Township facility is the only Y in the U.S. with a VA medical clinic. Business of Health reporter Kylie Valletta is here now with more. Kylie.
Well, thank you very much, Gary. There are about 120,000 veterans in central Indiana, and more than half of them have some long-term health need related to their military service. In addition to serving veterans, the new OrthoND Foundation YMCA is located in the most diverse township in Marion County, which creates unique health needs. Joining me now to tell us more is YMCA of Greater Indianapolis President and CEO Eric Ellsworth and Ann Graves, Executive Director of Health Initiatives. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
First of all, Eric, let's start with you. How will this new medical clinic help veterans' health, and could it be a national model?
Well, we sure hope that it'll be a national model. There are about 150 VA hospitals around the country, and in most of those 150 cities, there are vibrant YMCAs. And so we're hoping that when we do this well, that it'll be replicated over and over again across the country. It really helps veterans with their total health in spirit, mind, and body. And so there are all kinds of programs being offered through the VA, but also programs offered by the Y as well.
And you mentioned this project has been in the works for a long time, about 12 years, and in that time the population has really been growing in that area in Pike Township, but it's also the most diverse township in Marion County. So give us a picture, a snapshot of the local community there.
Right, well, there's no other township like Pike Township in terms of diversity, and when immigrant populations move to the Indianapolis area, normally they put their roots down in Pike Township, and so we're really excited about that. Also, the Pike Township is about 45% African American, and so that also gives it a rich history. And this is actually a legacy project of the previous two YMCAs, the Senate Avenue Y and the Fall Creek Y. This is basically the third iteration of those YMCAs. Back during times of segregation, those were African American YMCAs only. This is, of course, an integrated YMCA.
And there's some socioeconomic challenges in that area too. The number of students in Pike Township qualifying for free lunch has increased by 90%, and a quarter of the population receives food stamps. So how will the Y help address some of those unique health needs?
Absolutely. No. The Ortho Indy YMCA, it's one of our only 2 YMCAs with a teaching kitchen. So in that kitchen, we'll be offering programs that'll help families be able to eat healthier and learn how to prepare foods in a way that they like. In addition, we work outside of our walls as well. So it won't just be programs happening in the building, but we'll go out into the schools and other places in the community to offer programs where people can have access to them where they may need them the most.
And a lot of chronic disease burdens in that area as well.
Yes.
And you know, tis the season for New Year's resolutions. And you mentioned, you know, the Y is more than just a treadmill.
Right.
This Y is really going to focus on wellness and the whole picture, the whole person.
Yeah, so at the Y, we're going to meet people where they are. So our goal is to help everybody reach their health and wellness goals, no matter what they are. And exercise may be the place that a lot of people will start. Other times it may not be the best place to begin. So we have chronic disease prevention programs, we have return to health programs, and really nutrition and lifestyle programs. Our wellness advisors are there from open to close to help people with the support and really the motivation that they need to reach their goals.
Well, just a few seconds left, but you said there's been a lot of pent-up demand in the area. So how is membership?
It's terrific, and we usually have strong membership in the month of January. People are recommitting themselves to health. But this is a particularly good year because of the Ortho Indy Foundation YMCA. We've already got 1,000 new families signed up that have never been served by the Y before, and that's just in the last 3 weeks. So that's gone really well. But then overall, we're just seeing people recommitting themselves in fitness to the 12 Ys all over Central Indiana.
All right. Well, Eric and Ann, thank you both for being here. Gary, back to you.
All right, Kylie, thank you. Well, raising teacher pay continues to be one of the top issues in education in Indiana, and it is expected to be a priority for lawmakers during this year's General Assembly. In our Eye on Education segment this week, reporter and community editor for Chalkbeat, Indiana, Shayna Cavazos is here now to discuss some of the top education issues to watch at this session of the General Assembly. And Shayna, as always, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
All right, let's talk teacher pay. It's a hot button issue, gets a lot of attention, will get a lot of attention, I assume, in this session. Kind of lay it out for us and what to look for regarding teacher pay.
So, you know, the biggest question is really what kind of movement lawmakers will be able to make given the revenue that the state has available to it. And there's a lot of debate over whether there's enough to do anything considerable this year.
Is, in your view, I mean, because there will be a lot of talk about this, and certainly education and teacher pay is a huge issue. Where will the debate center? I know as we were talking off camera, some legislators have raised the specter of where districts are actually spending money, how much is going to the administration, how much is going to classrooms. Where's the debate going to, you think, center on this?
I think that's going to be a piece of it that's been brought up repeatedly in the last kind of, you know, ramp up to session that we've seen. And there'll just be a lot of debate over, you know, where are districts actually spending money, how much do we know, and are districts kind of on board with reducing what they spend. You know, trimming budgets when you're already feeling like you're crunched is difficult. Yeah,
the governor has said, I think a couple of times, that he feels quote unquote optimistic or feels good about being able to get money, a little extra money. Do you think that's realistic?
I think it'll be really interesting to see what his budget proposal is in a couple weeks. There doesn't seem to be a lot on the table, and it's hard to know where exactly that comes from.
Yeah. The issue of virtual schools, you feel as though that'll be an issue, a front burner issue, and maybe as it comes to oversight, maybe regulations around virtual schools.
I think if we're going to see them, they would happen this year. The state board made its recommendations, and lawmakers have told me so far that they expect there to be some movement, and it would be the first time that really Indiana has acted to regulate the schools rather than expand them.
So performance of the virtual schools really not been up to par. Is that part of what's driving this, you think?
Yeah, it hasn't been. Basically every virtual school in the state has received at least one F grade in recent years. I think right now all but one have.
Another big issue, and certainly has been a big issue in the business community, and that's early childhood education. And I know proponents will be back at the State House hoping to get more counties involved, more seats open up for this for pre-K education. Big issue, expensive issue. Where do you see the debate there?
I think it's really going to be is there enough for pre-K? You know, this is kind of a trend, right? Is there going to be enough? And it just doesn't seem to have kind of the fire behind it this year with lawmakers and legislative leaders as it has in years past. So I don't know that I'm super optimistic that there's going to be a big expansion of that program.
All right, let's move on to the politics of education, which has made your job probably a little more interesting this past year. State School Superintendent Jennifer McCormick announced that she wouldn't seek re-election. There's been a public airing of grievances, for lack of a better term. How do you assess the politics of education and any impact that might have?
Well, certainly having it all out in the public is going to make the conversations a bit different, and it'll be interesting to see kind of where lawmakers sign on to Dr. McCormick's priorities and wanting to fund them, given some of this back and forth that we've had.
All right, final issue, school safety. Unfortunately, came to light here in Indiana with some school shootings, one in particular in Noblesville that got a lot of national attention. Noblesville passed a referendum, $50 million for school safety. Do you see maybe some bills being introduced or at least debated regarding school safety?
Definitely. And after the special session last year, too, there's been a lot of school safety support. People are already filing bills to address that and to give schools kind of more flexibility or availability of money to beef up their security.
All right, will be a busy session in particular for education, and you're going to be very busy as well. Shana Cavazos, thanks very much, and look forward to having you back on the show again.
Yeah, thanks so much.
All right. Well, still ahead, our insiders will sound off on some of the week's top stories, but first, authorizing legal sports wagering in Indiana. Matt Bell, the president and CEO of the Casino Association of Indiana, offers some perspective on what lawmakers will have to consider in crafting a bill to legalize sports betting here. Well, given a recent ruling by the United States Supreme Court, it seems it's not a question of if, but when legalized sports wagering comes to Indiana. And the issue will be on the agenda in the 2019 session of the Indiana General Assembly. Bill Benner has more in this week's Inside Indiana Sports. Bill.
Gary, thanks. Well, betting on sports has been around nearly as long as sports themselves, but outside of Vegas and Atlantic City, it's been something many talked about but few admitted to. Now states and even professional leagues are looking to both legalize and legitimize sports gaming. And here to shed light on what could take place in Indiana is Matt Bell, a former state representative and president of the Casino Association of Indiana. And Matt, welcome. Appreciate you coming on the show. It's a busy time for you as the legislative session opens. What would be the Casino Association's role as this moves forward through the legislature?
Well, thanks for having me today. It's great to be here to talk with you about this topic and hopefully offer some education to your viewers about why Indiana should become the next state to legalize and authorize sports wagering in Indiana. The Casino Association of Indiana's members really stand with great consensus behind the idea of authorizing legal sports wagering in Indiana. We've taken a lot of time to study this issue over the last few years and have engaged partners even from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas to help educate stakeholders across the state on what great regulation of sports wagering looks like. So from our members' perspective, we want to take an activity that's occurring today in Hoosier households across the country, legalize it, create transparency, and create a revenue stream for the state and for our properties that'll be beneficial to all.
Yeah, and you mentioned it's been taking place today. It's been taking place for a long time. The establishment of lines, betting lines on every conceivable sporting event.
You know, as we study that,
always been around. Yeah.
The oldest recorded sports wagering laws date to the Roman Empire when they bet on chariots. So we have literally been wagering on sporting contests for thousands of years.
Well, so the Supreme Court said, okay, we're going to do away with the pretense. They've legalized it. Since then, 6 states have already come on board and again, moving across the country.
That's correct. And as legislatures convene across the country, we believe more and more states will authorize this activity within their borders. On May 14th, the Supreme Court struck down a federal law called PASPA, which denied states the opportunity to legalize sports wagering within their borders, except for those who are already offering it, Nevada and some sports lottery products in Oregon and a couple of other states. Indiana has seen legislation introduced over the past couple of years. There will be legislative efforts this year as well. And as we look nationally, our American Gaming Association has done polling that shows that more than 55% of Americans support the idea of legal sports wagering within their state borders.
You mentioned not just sports wagering not only take place in the casinos across the state of Indiana, but also some kind of mobile, on your mobile device, perhaps.
So we're hopeful that that will be the case, and that's a policy decision that legislators will wrestle with over the next few months. Today, there's a large and very profitable offshore illegal wagering industry. Today, folks all across the country, and even within Indiana, can use their mobile device to place bets on just about any sporting event that they want to. We believe that sports wagering legislation in Indiana should recognize that that's the way the Hoosier consumer interacts with that industry right now, and offer a legal and authorized way to do that by offering mobile wagering in Indiana.
Two real quick questions. We have a major athletic association, the National Collegiate Athletic Association, based right here in Indianapolis, within inside of the State House. How are they coming down on this?
So we're very encouraged by
in their backyard. I mean, it's going to be in their backyard.
It will be, and we're very encouraged by the stance the NCAA is taking toward legal and authorized sports wagering. Their position has evolved significantly over the years. They are no longer concerned about not hosting championship events in states who offer legal and authorized sports wagering. There's no threat that they might seek another home if Indiana were to do so. So we believe that the NCAA maintains a keen concern about their student athletes and keeping their student athletes away from wagering, but will not stand in the way of Hoosiers engaging in this practice in a legal and authorized way.
And if the bill gets to the governor's desk, Matt?
Well, if I were a betting man, I would bet that Governor Holcomb would sign it and allow it to become law.
All right. Well, Matt Bell of the Casino Association of Indiana, thanks for your insight, and we'll look to see how it all plays out, no pun intended, moving through the legislative session. Gary,
thanks for having me.
Back to you.
All right, Bill, thank you. Well, a new report from the Indiana Office of Tourism Development indicates the economic impact of tourism on the Hoosier economy is growing. Inside Indiana business reporter Mary Rachel Redmond joins us now with more. Mary Rachel.
No, that's right, Gary. The report commissioned by the IOTD shows Indiana is on the up and up, even setting a record in visitor spending in 2017. Pennsylvania-based Rockport Analytics, who conducted the study, says total visitor spending reached $12.7 billion, creating $9 billion in economic impact. The report also added Indiana tourism generated over $1 billion in state and local taxes while supporting nearly 200,000 full-time jobs. I sat down with Lieutenant Governor Suzanne Crouch this week, and she explained why tourism is such an important economic development tool for the state.
What this tourism report shows is that Indiana is truly going to the next level. We are attracting people to our state, but we also are having people stay here in our state. We had 80 million visitors to Indiana, and those 80 million visitors spent almost $13 billion. But I think what I really like to stress and point out is 72 cents of every dollar that is spent in a community through tourism stays in that community. So tourism really is about economic development here in Indiana.
Crouch says the tourism industry in Indiana has seen growth for 7 consecutive years. Meanwhile, the department recently added Misty Weisensteiner to lead the Indiana Office of Tourism Development. She officially takes the reins January 14th. Gary.
All right, Mary Rachel, big business getting bigger. Thanks very much. Well, coming up, our insiders are getting warmed up to sound off on the issues expected to make headlines during the 2019 session of the General Assembly, plus the Colts and the Pacers both trending in the right direction. There they are in the Inside Indiana Business Social Media Lounge, presented by the seasoned commercial bankers at Starbank, getting to know you and your business. Well, each week, a group of insiders joins me to offer perspectives on some of the week's top stories. This week, sounding off on a new year and a new session of the General Assembly. And the Colts into the playoffs for the first time since 2014. Colts and Pacers both on the right track, seemingly. Our insiders this week are Bose Public Affairs Group Principal Roger Harvey. Also, Faegre Baker Daniels partner Murray Clark. and Hollowell Consulting President Jennifer Hollowell. And thanks one and all for being a part of this edition of The Insiders. I'll start with the Indiana General Assembly has just kicked off in full gear for the 2019 session. A number of issues out there. Roger, I'll start with you. What do you think will be the top issue or that hot button issue that's really going to get a lot of attention?
Well, by far, because this is a budget year, it's going to be what are we going to do with the money, right? And there's going to be lots of people with ideas. And the reality is, I'm sure we'll talk about this during the segment, but a lot of the money has already been apportioned to whether it's Department of Child Services and other areas. So there's a small amount of money where a lot of people are going to be trying to get their projects taken care of. And that'll be the big battle that'll overshadow the entire session.
Yep. Jennifer?
A lot of ideas for the money, not a lot of money. I mean, the message that the governor and legislative leaders have been saying to people for weeks is there is not much left. And the DCS, even what they're requesting, $286 million for each year for the next 2 years. If that and the Medicaid requests and those things came in full, you're looking at like $35 million for all these other things that people want to see funded. And so it's going to be a challenge in figuring out what gets funded.
Yeah, that on the one hand, in the year, the governor talked optimistically about finding money for increased teacher pay, which is going to be a challenge, I think.
Yeah, I think we have to wait to see. I think they have some plans, but we have to wait and see what those are going to be. The state part of that will be a description there, but there are other people have ideas about raising revenue, right? Whether it's cigarette taxes and other things, but it's too early to see what's going to happen.
Ari?
Well, thank heaven the state's in good shape, really. I mean, and Roger and Jen are right. So you have this DCS pressure. You had a special appropriation of $250.
And we talked DCS, Department of Child Services.
Department of Child Services, and now they want to build it into their budget, and that's a real challenge. So we'll see what happens. But really, it's worth pointing out, 2-year budget in a budget session. This is the long session. It'll go until the third week of April, something like that. We like to say, in the end, everything's about the budget.
Yeah. And Jennifer talked about potentially raising some revenues. The State Chamber of Commerce is out with their agenda, and Kevin Bringer was on the show earlier this week talking about this focus on health, and that includes kind of revisiting this whole idea of a $2 per pack tax increase. Is that going to? You think there's an appetite at the State House?
Well,
for that
it's not the first time that's been proposed. I think generally the Republicans in the supermajorities aren't fond of any tax increases, but no doubt the chamber behind the movement is powerful. There's also discussion of raising the age of smoking from 18 to 21.
What do you think about this whole smoking issue, raising the age, the tax? Do you think we'll get traction and actually go somewhere this session?
I mean, there's a fairly big coalition that's formed for it, and the state chamber certainly being a leader is important, but there have been some pretty strong voices coming from high levels of the government saying it's not something they're interested in, so I think it's going to have to be a pretty compelling case for legislators to go there.
A number of people in the business community, tech community in particular, concerned that attention, a lot of attention will be drawn away toward potential hate crimes legislation and how that may cast the state of Indiana on more of a national scale. Roger, as you look at that debate, Indiana, I think one of 5 states without specific language, hate crime legislation language. Where do you see that debate?
Well, that's another one that's been around for a while. It's been talked about. You do have some new members in the legislature, but I think that's going to be one that'll probably go right down to the wire, if you will. There's going to be a lot of folks, because there's people that have real concerns about it, and there's others that are very passionate about it, and you have the business community that certainly is supportive of not being one of those 5 states that you referenced. So it'll come down to the wire, I think, for that one.
Do you sense this will become that contentious issue? Just a few short years ago, the RFRA issue and the attention and with social media that generated.
Well, so I've worked on this issue in the past for it and have watched it very closely. Speaker Bosma has been really clear that he doesn't want this to become divisive. He doesn't want everything to get hung up in it. It's hard to manage through that, but there are a couple of things that are really different this year, and the biggest one is that Governor Holcomb has come out for it. And he's been leading on it and with a strong voice. And we haven't necessarily had that in the past. It's been kind of left more for the legislators to see if they could get there before the governor would would really have to weigh in publicly. So I think his involvement makes it different. They're also, speaking of coalitions, there's a really big coalition forming for it with a lot of businesses. It isn't just kind of the nonprofit world and it's all kinds of companies and folks across the state. So, I mean, I think it's going to be their best chance, and it looks somewhat promising, but it gets tricky.
Another issue that likely to be on the agenda is sports gambling. That a number of states have already approved that. Indiana, another state that will look at this. I think the governor has, I don't know if he's necessarily come out in support of it, but I think generally they feel as though there is support at the state level there. Does it get through this?
Well, I mean,
session?
my friends say it will. To me, this just has the earmarks of an issue that as the session goes on and you deal with all the tough financial issues and then maybe some other ancillary, difficult, challenging issues, that this one gets to the end and maybe doesn't get over the finish line. But I could be wrong about that.
What's interesting about this one, though, is when you're talking about not a lot of money, this is another one of these revenue streams, because and that's where it gets interesting, is in the details, right? Yep. Because, are you talking just online betting, or do you have to physically go to a facility, and does that help the casino industry? And then what's the state's take on that? And I mean, there's a lot of moving parts on this. It's not just sports betting in general, and you're seeing 30-something states or so across the country that are going to be tackling this very issue. So that's one where you're looking for ways to generate revenue and help a supporting industry. That could be, it could be interesting to see how that plays out.
Speaking of sports, as we wrap up, the Colts in the playoffs for the first time in a few years now. As we tape this show, and in some areas of the state, Indianapolis included, as it airs, the game will already be over with the Texans, so we don't know how that played out. But the Colts obviously had quite a comeback year. The Pacers, fourth best record, I think, in the NBA. Both of our major league teams headed in the right direction.
Wait, didn't I tell you that the Colts would go to the playoffs?
I don't remember that.
Well, I think I said they go undefeated, but
that's.
But kudos to them, huh?
You're right.
1 out of 2.
You're batting 500 in baseball. That's a great.
Yeah, exactly. But what it does to the city is amazing.
Absolutely.
Just the electricity. And
absolutely. And I think by the time you tape this show next week, we'll be talking about another playoff game.
I like that. Kansas City. I like it. Roger Harvey, Jennifer Hollowell, Marie Clark. Thanks one and all, and we'll be right back after this. Coming up next week, Indiana, one of just 5 states without a clear and specific hate crimes law. Leadership from the United Way of Central Indiana and Cummins will be here to talk about why they feel legislation is needed to help attract and retain talent. Thanks for joining us this week. I'm Gary Dick. Go out and make it a successful week.
Inside Indiana Business with Gary Dick is a production of Grow Indiana Media Ventures, with support from WFYI Productions.